Ni hao.
Ni hao.
It doesn't matter. Ni hao.
Bonjour. And we're back again. The reason for our video today is protein.
Protein. The question that every single vegan or vegetarian gets every time they get out of the closet that they are vegetarian. Where'd you get your protein?
Yeah, and I get asked that many a times at the CrossFit box, at the gym as well, and I think it's a valid question because back in the day when I was not a vegan, I used to think that, vegans and vegetarians were lacking protein because I just associated protein from meat-based sources, but I guess it's very different now.
Yeah, no, same for me. I've never been really attracted to meat, but when I was younger, I wanted to be a vegetarian, but I would have never believed that it was possible to completely forego animal products. I did believe that you at least needed to keep dairy and eggs for the protein.
Of course. So we're here today to answer some of the questions that are commonly asked. My protein journey started when I was a young kid. I loved the Western-based diet and I love baby back ribs. My parents used to take me out to the steakhouse and I would have a T-bone and ribeye steak. And yeah, all my life I've always been into a high protein diet up to my time as a trainer. So about actually more than that I would say, I was having up to 1 kilo of meat a day. Because I had a difficulty digesting most of the proteins, I was also on digestive tablets, which I think in retrospect is pretty ludicrous. On top of that, I was also having a high amount of fish oils ranging from about 15 to 20 grams a day. So I was spending a whole heap on supplementation. But here right now, fully vegan, not thinking about protein at all, it's been an amazing journey for me.
Yeah, for me, I've never been someone that has particularly been attracted to meat or protein in general. Naturally, as a kid, I was my parents would take us to the buffet and all I would eat was the rice. My dad would be so angry, he'd be like, okay, I'll just pay $30 for you and you pretty much just ate the equivalent of like 50 cents of like a few bowls of rice. And as well, when we were ordering pizza, I remember taking out the toppings. So I mean, I'm talking about everything, like the cheese, the meat, everything, and just eating the crust and having my parents' crust, because I remember they were not eating the end of the crust because I think they wanted to like just be able to eat more. So I was just eating everyone's crust. So I've always naturally be attracted to carbohydrate until later in life when I was speed skating and I was looking for the extra edge. I saw the diet The Zone, and that's where I started getting quite obsessed with protein because it said vegetarians do not get enough protein, are protein deficient. You need the magic formula is 30% of your calories coming from protein. And I was just very diligent with it. Every single meals had to have 30% protein. So I would get deli meats, like turkey. I had so much turkey. I had so much cottage cheese, milk. All of a sudden, all food that I was never attracted towards, I was eating because I believed that I needed that extra edge.
Especially when you were competing as well.
Yeah, and what happened is that actually it went really badly for me. Because The Zone even is a calorie reduced diet, I was probably now at that point eating less than 2,000 calories a day, and I was training 2 to 3 times a day. So I lost a lot of weight, and which for a speed skater is really bad. Also, I was coming from already being quite thin. I became really thin, and so my performance went down quite a bit, and it took me a long time to try to get over it and get back to an alright level. And then it was too late. So for me, quite a bad experience. And then again, when I met Luke, I went back to a high protein, low carbohydrate diet because that's what he was doing, and we were doing it together. And same thing. I had lots of problems with digesting the meat. It was bad. It was to a point where it was so painful. Every single meals I was stressed. I was just like,
and you were taking digestive tablets as well?
Absolutely. The maximum. I remember I did this test, and it was basically showing that I had like no digestive juices or something like that, and no acid whatsoever in my stomach. and I had to take like the maximum of HCl tablets, and
Which is hydrochloric acid.
Yes, and I was taking that. If I was forgetting my tablets, I was actually anxious because I knew it was going to be really bad. Until I found the vegan diet, and then everything changed for me. All of a sudden I was able to digest, there was no pain after meals, and the rest is history. We'll admit something here. The amino acid profile of meat and other animal products is actually the closest to our genetic makeup, which makes meat and dairy and eggs the ideal.
And it's really anabolic. Definitely, it's
to grow big muscles as quickly as possible. Yes, it is true.
Yeah. So from my background, when I was on a kilo a day, I was probably a lot bigger than I was. I'm probably about 80.
You must be under 80 now.
Actually, I'm probably about 80 kilos now, and 8% body fat. And back then, I was probably about 85, 86, and I was trying to shoot for 90 kilos. I was in a bodybuilding kind of mindset. I just wanted to be big. I wanted to be thick. I was not able to stay lean without actually working really hard for it and taking a whole heap of fat burners. And initially, when I turned vegan, because I was on a low carb perspective for quite a long time, I suddenly inflated after about a month since turning vegan, and I was swole, as they call it. I think partly because being on a low carb diet, I was lacking a lot of nutrients and of course carbs, and my glycogen stores were pretty empty.
So basically what happened to you is like when bodybuilders for a show wants to look as swole as possible, they do load. They do load on like rice cakes and jam.
Yep.
So that basically the same thing happened to you.
Exactly, and my body just went, whoa, okay, let's work with this. And shortly after a few months, I actually lost my size. And what I realized was the size that I lost wasn't really muscle mass, it was more inflammation. Consuming a kilo of meat a day isn't cheap. So I was going for as cheap as possible, factory farm style. I went to the Vietnamese
market,
food scrape market.
Oh my god!
And I remember opening
those maggots.
I'm
still scarred.
Yeah, Emily opened my pack of chicken breasts. There was probably about 6 or 8 in there, and there were just little maggots just crawling through my chicken breast. I was just like, I was pretty grossed out. So yeah.
And I'm sure we were such in a mindset, and I'm sure we actually thought back then, like, how can we save those chicken breasts?
Yeah, exactly. We were just trying to pick it out, but it didn't work.
No.
But it's pretty gross. But yeah, I mean, I started losing excess body fat, I would say, and I became leaner.
Yeah.
As time passed, probably about a year, 2 years on, I realized that my body was starting to reset, and it was starting to be a lot more efficient at breaking down the food that I was eating. I was assimilating better, I was digesting better, and I believe that through this whole process, my body kind of reset itself and retrained itself to be more sensitive at extracting nutrients from the food that I eat. So yeah, I mean, right now I find that I'm putting on lean gains a lot easier without really working that hard.
And to go back to what we were talking about, yes, animal protein probably is more efficient for quick gains. However, it does make muscle grow, but it makes everything else grow.
Yeah, it's not isolated, the muscle tissue and cell growth. It's if you have cancer, it will promote cancer growth as well.
Exactly.
As many people say, as low carb proponents or even paleo proponents would say, well, correlation does not equal causation. Let me just put this back to you. For example, if you had cancer or you had heart disease and you knew that the food that you were actually consuming on a daily basis had a possibility of making your condition worse, would you actually continue doing what you're doing?
And then we know lately, just lately with the World Health Organization, they have actually classified not all meat, but
Processed meat?
processed meat and even red meat at a lower grade as a carcinogen as strong as cigarettes. So it is proved. It has been accepted in the whole world and
medical literature to say that
mm-hmm.
processed meat and meat, there is a correlation with cancer. Maybe not a cause for cancer, but it's pretty strong, the links.
And we've seen it through Dr. Campbell in his amazing book, the China Study, tells a few situations where he observed that a high consumption of animal protein was associated with increase in cancer cells. And the first time that he saw it was when he went to the Philippines, where they were taking care of kids with malnutrition. They realized that actually there was the highest incidence of cancer, especially like bowel cancer, on kids that were eating a Western diet, on kids that had the most money. And they were going there to help the kids with malnutrition, and they were finding out, oh my God, cancer is actually prevalent in kids who have money. So that's something that planted a seed for him. As well as when he did tests in labs on rats, he realized that he could actually turn on and off the cancer cells because the rats had been already infected with carcinogenics, which meant that they had the cancer in them.
And he was just using protein concentrations to ascertain whether it would actually stimulate cancer growth. So what Dr. Campbell found through these lab tests were that for 20% of animal proteins, cancer cell activity actually increased. On the flip side, for 20% of plant proteins, which was soy, I think.
And the animal protein he was using was casein.
Was casein, which is present in milk, the milk protein. With soy, it did not promote cancer activity. And another test that he actually did, by altering the protein concentration, so when he actually dropped the protein content to 10%, that actually stopped cancer activity, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah. They surveyed 65 counties and 65 different counties, and based on their findings, they found a strong correlation between animal protein consumption and cancer, heart disease, diabetes, and other degenerative disease. Well, it first starts with the way our body is made. So let's compare us with a carnivore, like the cat. Our digestive tract is 12 times the length of our torso. For a cat or a lion, it's 3 times. What does that happen? The length of their torso is that short because they want to diminish the transit of the food so it doesn't rot.
The meat and the proteins, the animal proteins that we actually consume has a longer path to travel, so there's a likelihood for it to get stuck along the way.
Exactly. Our digestive system as well is made in a way that because it's longer, it absorbs carbohydrates better, as well as food that has a high water content, like fruits.
Yeah. When we look at, for example, a silverback gorilla, where in terms of our DNA, we're probably about 95-97% similar in terms of our DNA and our genetic makeup. And when we look at a silverback gorilla, we look at its traditional diet, its natural diet. 95% of its diet is mainly fruit, stems, and leaves, and about 3-5% is actually termites and ants.
The main advantage of a plant protein is as we mentioned before, it's easier to digest. It doesn't get stuck in your digestive system.
And the thing about plant-based proteins versus animal-based proteins are that plant proteins have fiber and 0 cholesterol. Animal-based proteins are loaded with cholesterol and at the same time 0 fiber.
Which is cholesterol. A lot of people say, yeah, well, we need cholesterol. We make our own cholesterol. We do not need extra cholesterol to be ingested. So that's to be understood. And a lot of people actually have a problem with too much cholesterol. I've very rarely heard of, I have not enough cholesterol.
Plant-based proteins are bang for buck.
So you don't only get protein, you actually get a bunch of phytonutrients, vitamins, fibers. Fibers are only contained in plant food, so you don't have fibers in eggs, dairy, and meat, which helps to digest. And as well, it feeds the good bacteria in our gut. So yeah, you get so much more when you eat plant protein than when you eat just a piece of meat. Another misconception is that a vegetarian or mostly a vegan diet does not provide the 9 essential amino acids.
So in total, we actually need 22 amino acids to function optimally.
Yeah.
And out of the 22, 9 are essential.
Meaning that our body does not produce them, so we have to get them from food. Plant food contain all the 9 amino acids, and there are even some plants that do have a full amino profile. What does a full amino profile mean?
So a full amino acid profile means that, well, it's termed a complete protein. It means that each and every essential amino acid is in correct proportion for it to be utilized efficiently. So, for example, complete protein would be something like hemp,
soy, quinoa,
chia seeds.
So there's another way as well, is to eat food that complete each other. Mm-hmm. And then beans will be high in that amino acid, but lower in an amino acid that actually grains.
Could be methionine or cysteine, something like that. So in a nutshell, by actually combining certain foods, you get a full spectrum of the essential amino acids at the correct levels for utilization.
And the good news is you don't even have to eat those food in the same meal as it used to be believed, because your body will store these amino acids and will be able to complete the chain for probably a period of 48 hours. So let's say you can have bread in the morning, and then you can have your beans at night, and you'll be fine.
I personally used to think like I needed 2 to 3 times body weight to sustain muscle mass. On the contrary, we don't actually need that much protein, do we?
Well, again, the World Health Organization has recommended 0.8 gram of protein per kilogram of body weight,
which works out to be about 8 to 10% of your total calories.
And that is basically a very generous recommendation, because they found that probably 5 or 6% was fine for most of the population. They just wanted their recommendation to be covering everyone.
Looking at the Western diet these days, and with the high protein, low carb kind of mentality,
or the zone,
protein concentrations are probably about 30 to 40% of your total amount of calories.
And most of them being from animal protein. So for us, how we've taken everything on board, obviously when we first became vegan, it was so new to us. There's this fear that, I don't know, you're going to crumble because you're lacking protein.
You're going to lose muscle mass.
Absolutely. So we were pretty much going 1-for-1. We were cooking in the same way as we were cooking with meat. So, stir fries and, protein and vegetable and grain as we were with meat. So we were replacing pretty much 1-to-1 the protein that we were eating.
So easily throughout the day, I was having at least 2 to 3 blocks of tofu, supplementing with a plant-based protein shake. And I was easily consuming about 180 to 200 grams of protein a day.
So pretty much 1-to-1.
And I was fine like hell.
Yeah. But at the same time, I do believe that this was okay. It's part of a journey. And if you are transitioning, it's fine. It's okay. I do believe that it's probably helpful for you to get enough food. And as you are working your brain around making these new recipes and getting in the hang of it, I think it's okay to replace the meat that you were eating with tofu, seitan, tempeh, beans. If it makes you feel safe, and if it makes the process of adopting this new diet and cooking easier for you. But as you said, it was still a little bit hard to digest with so much protein, and yes, I can attest it was fun at night.
Yeah, I was doing the Dutch oven thing. I just let one rip, and then I just kind of fan it, and she didn't really like that very much.
And for me, as I mentioned, I've never been a protein person, so to have, I'm a big proponent of soy, but for me, I have to have it in smaller amounts, and to have it at 2 meals out of 3 was probably too much for me. So I was, same thing, a little bit problem with, in the intestinal area. And I felt as well that my body was not as efficient. It was just a feeling. So for me, quickly I got interested, read about it, and discovered that I didn't even need to think about protein, that protein was everywhere. So I just needed to feed my body enough, and the foods that I was craving, meaning lots of fruits, lots of vegetable, little bit of nuts and seed, and some grains, and I was fine. I didn't even have to think, oh, I need my protein at every meal. They're always there.
Back then, when I was having at least about 180 to 200 grams of protein, I don't even think about protein as a macronutrient right now. I probably have about 1/3 or a quarter of what I used to have, and I'm actually putting on lean muscle right now. My performance has actually increased. My energy levels are just through the roof. I'm training twice as long, twice as hard, and recovering twice as fast. And protein is not one macronutrient I think about. The only time really though is probably post-workout.
Yep, same for me. During and after workout is the only time that I consciously think of a concentrated protein, and that I actually think of macronutrients. So during and after, I use Tailwind, which is not protein at all. It's a pure carbohydrate, easy to digest. And so during and right after, just to replenish my glycogen store. And
good old power plant protein.
Yay! So the only time that I really consciously think of adding a highly concentrated source of protein is about 3 or 4 hours within after a tough workout, so either a tempo run, a long run, or a race. Then I will consciously have a meal, which is either a big smoothie or a sit-down meal with a high source of protein. So if it's my smoothie, I'll use this one. Oh, this one is Himalayan salted caramels. So
yeah. And for me, after CrossFit, I would use concentrated protein source. I used to have a full scoop, but now I just have half a scoop. Same like Emily, heaps of fruits, probably about 2 to 3 bananas, coconut water, some sea salt, maybe some maca powder in there, and just a half scoop of protein. And it's just for post-workout recovery. So I don't actually focus on supplementing with it.
Yeah. It's basically to give our body a little extra boost to start the repairing process.
That kind of sums up what we have for you in terms of protein and the questions that we've been asked. We hope you got some value from it.
And if you've got any questions, just put them down below. We might do a follow-up video. It's always extra questions. Or if you're vegan yourself, what other questions you get?
Yeah.
And then we'll make a video on it.
Exactly. So if you like this video, please click like, comment, and share. And
subscribe as well.
Yeah, subscribe as well. And thank you for watching.
Don't forget to fuel
positive.